right, so we're at the Alberta Beef Industry Conference, and I'm with Andy Cumming, Director of Field Services for the NRCB. So you talked a lot about manure, but first let's talk about permits. Who needs a permit in terms of feedlot operators?
Hi Debra, thanks for that. Permits are required under the Agricultural Operations Practices Act for confined feeding operations that have in excess of a certain number of livestock, and that number depends on the species of livestock that the operation will have in it. Also, you would need a permit if you had a manure storage which has in excess of 500 tons of manure storage capacity.
And you said that was roughly 350 feeder.
That's correct. So to give you an idea, 350 feeder animals, that's less than 900 pounds, would produce about 500 tons of manure in any particular year.
So what are some of our options as feedlot owners in terms of manure management, manure storage?
Well, typically feedlot operators will store manure in their pens, so their pens are considered to be manure storage facilities. A lot of operations also have dedicated manure storage areas outside of their pens, which allows them to keep their pens clean and minimize any manure buildup within the facilities themselves. It allows them more management options, and we have seen some feedlots who have composting facilities as well. So those are your longer term manure storages that we see. Long-term manure storages would require some sort of a liner underneath the facility to protect groundwater, and that can be a constructed liner or it could be a naturally occurring liner. They also need to protect the manure storage from water which might run onto the facility, and also to contain any runoff water that would come from the facility, so that you're not getting any contaminated water leaving the operation.
So it's basically trying to hold that manure in one spot.
That's correct. It's containing the manure in a spot which protects the environment and therefore protects our natural resources.
You mentioned natural liner. What would that be?
Well, we're blessed in Alberta. In many parts of Alberta, we have very good clay soils. Clay soils act as an aquitard, which would be a type of barrier to the flow of water or any water that might contain manure constituents. So it forms a protective layer, and those would be the sort of natural barriers that we would be talking about for manure storages.
So I would be able to determine just through a soil test whether or not there's enough clay to be considered a liner?
That's absolutely right. So soil testing is part of what we would be looking at for any application that we received for a manure storage. So if you can show that you have suitable material under there, that you don't need to have a constructed liner, that would certainly meet the requirements of AOPA.
And then what would if I don't have enough clay, what would a constructed liner be made of, or where would I get that?
Well, constructed liners can be constructed out of recompacted clay material, so that you can recompact it and form it into a barrier, a type of material that will slow down the travel and transportation of nutrients much more than it would in its natural state. You could also use, and we've seen this in the past, we haven't seen it very regularly for feedlots, other liners such as synthetic liners or even concrete floors to feeding pens.
There's some rules around, once we've stored our manure and we want to put it on the ground, spread it out, there's rules around that as well in terms of waterways and soil testing?
That's correct. So when people want to utilize their manure and get the benefit from the nutrients in the manure, there are some requirements to keep it away and protect surface water, to protect groundwater, and we're talking about separation distances here from water wells, springs, and dependent on the slope, the steeper the slope, the greater the separation from a surface water source. In addition, there are also setbacks from residences which aren't owned by the operator when you are applying manure, and dependent on the type of application and incorporation you're using.
And then, so what you talked about soil testing. Once we've applied our manure, we can't exceed certain nutrient
That's right. There is a nutrient loading limit that is set out in AOPA, and it sets the upper limits for nitrate, nitrogen, and salinity. So there is testing that is required by operators who are putting on more than 500 tons of manure, that they maintain those soil nutrient records for the lands on which they're applying the manure, and those records need to be available should an NRCB inspector come out and want to have a look at the record and see what the loadings are.
So not only are there quite a few rules for us, but we have to keep good management records.
That's correct, and our experience is that most operators are keeping a lot of these records anyway. It's more a case of formalizing it and making sure that those records are kept and aren't just on a scrap of paper somewhere where that gets easily misplaced.
If we need more information about some of the rules and where to submit all this information, where can we go?
We would welcome any questions about any of the Agricultural Operations Practices Act regulations. Direct calls to any of our NRCB offices. You can also contact Alberta Agriculture. They have extension officers who will gladly help answer any questions about AOPA. As well, visit our website, www.nrcb.ca. There's a wealth of information, guides, and technical documents on there which would assist any operator.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you.